So I woke this morning in a relatively good mood, sort of the usual, went for a swim, and came back to find this article from the Daily Mail. Where has it gone? There it is. Describing the putrid, filthy poison that is the parliamentary aftermath of Black Lives Matter UK. Turns out that Black Lives Matter, contrary to some of my contemporaries' beliefs, don't actually need to change or demand anything substantive or real in terms of policy, as just their very existence invokes the purest form of submission from our UK elites. This is the purest evil. Parliamentary staff are told to write poems about privilege on a digital wall made after Black Lives Matter protests, with one woke worker insisting they can no longer watch police comedy Brooklyn Nine-Nine over its cozy lies. It sounds silly, it sounds stupid, it sounds like something to laugh at, until you realise this is being mandated throughout our institutions. It is not just government doing this, it is our educational institutions, it is our business institutions, from the very biggest corporation to the very smallest of small town businesses. This entire thing, let me see. Parliamentary staff have been urged to admit their privilege on a digital wall. Staff can write poetry and give their support for BAME colleagues on the wall. The digital platform was set up by Parliament's diversity group, Parliareach. Abolish it. Get it the fuck out. It's the purest form of the bastardization of Christian doctrine, which has us all admit in our limited capacity as human beings, we mess up, we get things wrong, we're all sinners in the eyes of God. This online platform simply exchanges God for minorities and sin for their own definition of racism, that being power plus privilege. Thus, all the parliamentarians must address their privilege. Except, it isn't the all-knowing politicians. It is an admission that they, in their hubris, occasionally misuse public funds for their own gain. It isn't an admission that on £70,000 a year they are wealthier and more powerful than the vast majority of the populace. It's not a reference to the educational level, the generational class differences, their inheritance, the enormous access to resources. No, it's that white staffers, most of whom are modestly paid civil service employees, are being shamed into describing the colour of their skin as a privilege. They may tack on the other factors that I've just mentioned and claim that they all stem from this same univariate arbitrary melanin allowance, but that is the root of it. Parliamentary staff have been urged to admit their privilege through an online platform that has been set up in the wake of the BLM protests. Officials have reportedly been issued with an inclusivity toolkit by senior figures, which encourages white workers to acknowledge their internalized racism. It's just an inclusivity toolkit. What did I just say anyway? What did I literally just say? The concept of internalized racism. It's a pseudoscientific, poisonous, evil, cultish belief that centers around the white man in particular as the source of all ills. I won't be having it. I can't be having it. If somebody told me that I was evil to my face because of the nature of my birth, I would spit in his face and call him what he is, a damned liar. The idea that these people should take yours and my tax, that they should take public funds, be paid exorbitantly to perpetuate hatred, division and evil, to instantiate the very systemic racism they claim to oppose, is not just offensive, it's not just subversive, it is evil. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's a common phrase, but I don't believe these intentions are good at all. Even if the evil bastards, demonic spawn that they are, understood what good is. Why be racist when you could be kind, they say. And then they turn it back to say, you're either an anti-racist or you're a racist. And the first step to becoming a so-called anti-racist is to admit your own original sin. Your own racist action. Whether you intend it or not, you cannot control it. You are a victim of your own prejudice, one that you all have. Every single one of you, unless You submit yourselves to us, unless you become subservient to all those around you who hold the mighty name of BAME. Pass up your opportunities for your minority betters on the basis that they are minorities and not that they are your betters. Well, if you don't do that, you're just a filthy racist. The impossible choice offered by so-called inclusivity experts is between being called a racist or being called a racist with extra steps. Then we have the technique. Oh, let's have a look at what we've got here. The digital wall was set up by Parlireach in order for staff to profess their privilege, write poetry and give their support for black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues, according to the Telegraph. It's just poetry. It's just poetry. It would be laughable if it wasn't so bloody dangerous. We're not even at the worst part yet. Staff were given advice on how to support Black Lives Matter protests, such as attending the protests and how to use your social media after the Edward Colston statue was pulled down in Bristol in June. And it's like, you're fucking Parliament. You don't support any protests. You don't demand support from your employees for the protests. If they supported the protests, they'd be out there protesting and you would be firing them. In a just world, you would be firing them for failing to maintain public impartiality as a member of Her Majesty's government. You have the right to protest, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to continue working in an institution which is supposed to be dedicated to impartiality and carrying out the wishes of Her Majesty's government. You do not get to hold a public opinion in this particular job. In the same way that as a member of the military, I am not. I can be disciplined. I could be disciplined if I am criticising the military as a whole, and rightly so. I would consider there's nothing wrong with being a conscientious objector. There's nothing wrong with protesting the government if you feel like it. But if you're protesting the government, you should not be working in it. Your allegiance is to yourself, your personal opinions are your own. But when you are a servant of the people, you should be fired for demonstrating publicly your support for a public matter. I'm not talking about MPs who will politic and debate social issues. That's their job. I'm talking about the minimum wage data entry civil servants all the way up to the principal private secretaries. I'm talking about every inch of the bureaucratic process that is Parliament. Like judges, they should be denied the politicisation of their workplace. They are there to uphold the current system, whichever it may be, and if they don't like it, they can find work elsewhere. Messages posted on the digital solidarity and support wall, which seems to be encouraging exclusivity and division, by the way, include one woman saying, "As a white woman, I acknowledge my privilege and continue to educate myself." First off, what a nothing sentence, because they are committing to nothing and they are admitting nothing, apart from the rather vague term of privilege, which, as we all know, is just a simple list of things which have been attributed to the white race by racists, so it doesn't really mean anything. One person posted on the platform arguing staff should no longer watch American comedy series Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which stars Andy Samberg, because it sold a cosy lie about policing. First off, you shouldn't be dictating to people what they can and can't enjoy for entertainment in their own private lives. But secondly, this is an American cop show, a comedy at that, which is obviously going to be slightly larger than life, and it is in America. We do not have the same problems in the United Kingdom that they have in America. And even then, I've been watching a lot of Donut Operator. He's on YouTube. Very good channel if you enjoy that sort of thing. And I am struggling at this point to see whether or not there are actually severe racism problems within the US police. Now, I might disagree that the US with the US police in terms of the strength of their response to some incidents, but in terms of how they're reacting, they are reacting reasonably. They're reacting to people who are unhinged, dangerous, threatening, or simply not complying. And the simple fact of the matter is, if the police are doing something wrong with you, have your day in court. And the difference between many of the cases where it's unarmed people versus, unarmed white people and unarmed black people in the US, it just appears to be that the attitude of the black community towards the police is so toxic that it has fostered such a toxic response from the youth of the black community towards the police, that when they get belligerent, when they run, when they decide that they are above the law, then they don't comply, and this results in higher casualty rates. But I'm not here to cast judgment on the American system. It's just an impression that I've got. It's just a perception, but I don't live there, so I'm not going to comment, formally on it, etc. Yeah. So another wrote, as a white man, I'm conscious of the privilege I have. The admissions have been described as divisive by some MPs. This would be two of them, Danny Kruger and Miriam Caters. It's like, at least that's a grand total of 2 Tory MPs, to which they get the bog standard response of racism has no place in Parliament, blah, blah, blah. Why are you allowing the racists to administer the diversity and inclusivity training then? I choose to believe that the vast majority of these people are unwitting pawns to positive moral emphasis framing, rather than the evil higher-ups that are sending this filth down. These people are a white supremacist's wet dream. The racists of all stripes are crowing with victory at the radicalisation and the racialisation of the UK, something it never had before. We were somewhat xenophobic, as all people are, and all that xenophobia means, in different strengths and different stripes, is that people have an in-group preference, and that they prefer cultures which are closer to their own. What a surprise. Every culture is the same. Every culture is xenophobic. We had our fair share of racists before, particularly in a time when many people hadn't seen anyone from another part of the world. But mostly disagreement between people of other races, God, I hate using the word, it is such a bland, uninteresting failure of a description, was on the grounds of most disagreement between people of other races was on the grounds of national identity. It was culture and class, not something as ethereal, as immaterial, as unholy as the conception of race. We need to ban diversity training as soon as humanly possible, and even then it's going to take 20 years to undo this pernicious, evil, racist, shitty doctrine. It makes me so angry because it seems incremental, almost harmless to, poetry. It seems ridiculous, right? To adults who are reasonable and rational. Oh, no one will really believe that. It's something to laugh at, something to sneer at, something to dismiss as the ravings of the cult that it is. But it has infected the highest levels of governmental office. It has perverted the course of justice and laid the ground for laws that have undermined the freedoms and attitude of a nation through the subversion of education, law, social interaction, and parliament, from the poorly named Equality Act to the ever-increasing purview of hate speech laws and this diversity training bollocks. The Lord has some resilience to it because it replaces peers slower than the Commons, but how long before that too falls to ruin and takes the rest of us with it? It threatens every personal and private thought, interaction and development. It threatens every business, every institution, every family, man, woman and child. I am at my wit's end with it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for watching.